Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tim. This is another Real Ideal Gear review, and today we're looking at the watches that have left my collection. So we'll be going through about 22 watches. It's pretty quick, lightning fast actually, and just talking about the reasons why those watches, mainly why they left my collection. There's also some good reasons why I had those watches to start with. So these are not just terrible watches. These are just watches that didn't meet my expectations, my preferences, my physical limitations, such as my reading glasses and legibility and all that. So let's get into this list and go through this really quick. So first on the list was probably one of the earliest high beat movement watches I purchased, which was the Chronofix 1952 Pilot. This watch I think is a great watch. I love the design of it. I love the looks of it. I just couldn't read the scale on here, the rotating scale that was on the bezel. And also the bezel and the rotating scale were just not quite my preference when it came down to how they operated. But the high beat movement, the look of the watch, sapphire crystal, everything about this watch looked really, really nice. I just had a hard time reading this watch. Next up was the Orient Kamasu. There is a lot on the internet about the Orient Kamasu, and quite frankly, I love this watch. I think it's a great watch, but my second oldest son, Noah, which he's been on a couple of episodes, he wanted it more than I did, quite frankly, and I thought it was time for me to give up one of my dive watches and open up the collection a little bit for some other, maybe more creative-looking dive watches as well. So he ended up with that Kamasu, and he ended up putting another bracelet on there that he really likes, and it's one of his favorites in his collection, so really glad that that made it into his collection. So the Beaudary Urban was one of the earlier AliExpress watches that I've purchased. And I really like the watch. I love the high beat movement, the 72-hour power reserve. That combination you just don't see very often. I thought the design was pretty cool. And quite frankly, I was taken in by the photographs on the AliExpress website. In person, much harder to read. The legibility is much more difficult. They have updated this watch to a newer version, which is a little bit easier to read. The hands stand out a little bit better from the skeletonized background. But for me, it just wasn't a good fit, and so I gave this to my youngest stepson. He's enjoying the watch. Next up is the Seiko 5 SRPD 85. I only had a couple of Seikos in my collection for a while. Now I'm down to one. This was the other one, and I really like the dial on this watch. Some people call it the coffee watch. There's some other names I've seen in the comments when I shared this video on the internet. But this watch, I think that there's no question the dial is incredible on this watch. I liked it. I didn't think the bezel was as accurate as it should be. Common complaint among Seiko owners when it comes to dive watches. And also the NATO strap, it just was too high off the wrist. And I had a hard time not using the NATO strap because it had the same plating on the keepers and on the pin buckle as was on the case. And so to swap that out and have something different just didn't sit well with me. And I didn't wear it very often, so for that reason, I sold that watch off. Next up is the North Edge Gavia. This is a legitimate challenger to the ProTrek triple sensor watch that I absolutely love and I've owned for decades. But this is a watch that legitimately challenged that watch for all the features that it has, with the compass and the barometer and all of the features that are very, very similar to the ProTrek. The one thing I didn't really like about it was the integrated bracelet, and it was really built for bigger wrists. And so a friend of mine who has bigger wrists than I do, and he was going through a tough time, and this was a watch that I thought really fit his personality and what he wanted to do. It has a step counter built into it, which is really cool as well. I thought this would be something that he would enjoy more than I did. So I gave it to him, and as far as I know, he's enjoying this watch a lot. So the North Edge Gavia, I highly recommend it because it has the step counter and it has some of the outdoor tools that you're going to find in the ProTrek in the North Edge Gavia. Great watch. The Citizen ProMaster Aqualand. The ultimate mountain man watch is what I called it, and I actually do think it's still the same. I think it's a great mountain man watch. This is a watch that has all the bells and whistles for anybody who's interested in diving, but I live in the Rocky Mountains, so for me, the diving piece is just not that important. I do like the lume on the hands. I like the handset. The watch looks great. It's kind of that big, burly, high off the wrist type presence watch. I mean, you can't miss this watch. I did find a Citizen out there that's more in line with what I like, and it's probably the Altachron. So I'm going to sell this watch, and I'm going to go after the Altachron. So if you're looking for a great Aqualand, check out my website, realidealgear.com, and I've got it for sale on there for, I think, a reasonable price. Next up is the Rutland Vintage Chronograph. Now, this watch got some bad press by me because I had a bad experience with the quality control of this chronograph. I really, really like the design. I love the chronograph function on here. The problem was the chronograph second hand did not line up with the chapter ring, with all the marks in the chapter ring. And so for me, I just couldn't take it. I thought, you know what, this is one where I'm going to send it back. I haven't purchased another one, but I would be very interested in purchasing another one of these watches. No questions asked. Next up is the Loris Lumibrite. This is a field watch that I saw, and when I saw it, it was like, oh, this is a challenger to one of my favorite field watches in that, under $30 range, the MDC, the infantry. However, the Loris Lumibrite is not under $30. It's more like in the $70 range here in the United States. This is primarily a European model. It has a full lume dial. It has a great quartz movement. It has a strap on there that is, I just didn't like the strap. It was just too short. Didn't really fit my personality, and so I put a leather strap on there. I really like the leather strap. So this watch, I think, does a great job. It's twice as much as the MDC. Do I think it's worth the money? It's close. The design is more enjoyable. It's a little bit more traditional as far as a field watch goes. And I think it also offers a little bit better water protection, water resistance rating. So for those reasons, I think it's a great watch. It's just the price and the strap really got to me. And so it's actually for sale on my webpage. Check it out if you want. But I think this is a great watch for that $70 range if you're in the States. And if you're in the European market, I'm not exactly sure what the price range would be, but check it out. I think it's a good field watch for anybody who's looking for a full lume dialed field watch. Next up is the Invicta Pro Diver. I really love the design. Sure, it's an homage, but the design is just fantastic. The execution of it, and for less than $100, you can't go wrong with this. This is an automatic movement, a Seiko NH35 automatic movement. It has a great look to it. The bezel color, I think the bezel color is it's awesome. It's this deep crimson red, which is just a fantastic color. And you have some polish, you have some brushing on there. The overall combination of this watch is just fantastic. Now, my oldest stepson, he's in a hockey league, and when they have home games, they get dressed up for home games. I gave it to him. He's enjoying it. I think this is a watch that matches up the color scheme of his team as well. So he gets this watch. I think it's a great fit for him. Next up is the Bertucci DX3. A field watch that I was really hoping would unseat the MDC. The MDC is that $26 Amazon special that it was just really hard to beat. I thought this watch was going to do it. It has a great dial, has a great second hand. It has a great overall legibility to it. The downside is the NATO strap. I'm just not a fan of those big keepers that fold back and forth. And then also the lugs that are on the watch are fixed into the case. So I'm just not a big fan of that whole setup. I really wanted to put other straps on this other than a NATO strap. I'm not a huge NATO strap guy because it just elevates the watch higher off your wrist. And for that reason, I just didn't want to hang on to this watch, and so I ended up giving this away. The infantry field. Now, if there's ever a matchup between the MDC field watch and the infantry field watch, a non-MDC watch, this was going to be it. They're both very similarly priced. They both have similar specs. And so when I looked at these two watches, I thought, okay, this is going to be a great throwdown. So check out the throwdown episode on these two, and you'll see which one came out on top. So the field watch, the non-MDC version, was one that I also gave away. But I don't think that watch is anything to be shy about. I think that's a really good watch. It's right on par with the MDC. I would highly recommend the watch. I think it's worth checking out. And for the price, you can't go wrong with a watch like that. Very legible, kind of Hamilton khaki-esque when it comes down to the design features of it. But it has a multi-layered dial to it. So check that out. I think it's definitely worth a look. Next up is the Steel Dive 1928. This was a watch that I looked at and said, okay, so here is my Hamilton khaki homage watch. Let's pull this out and just take a look at this watch. Now, the other thing about this watch that you can't miss is the crown. It has an oversized onion crown. And for that reason, I think that reason alone, Steel Dive decided to call this a pilot watch. I don't know why they called it a pilot watch. To me, this is a field watch that has an onion crown on it. But whatever. They're the ones who gave it the name. We'll stick with the name. So they call this the pilot watch. I pulled it in. I like the watch a lot. I just didn't wear it very much. And the one thing that bothered me the most was the clasp, the adjustment on the clasp. That model, you need to have the spring bar micro adjust, or you need to have the on-the-fly adjust. But to have this almost Rolex-esque type adjustment just does not fit this watch at all. It's kind of trying to do too many things at once, trying to be a pilot watch when it's actually a field watch. And then you put on this kind of Rolex adjustable clasp on there, which doesn't work whatsoever. So I gave this watch away. My second oldest son wanted this watch, And what he did to it, I think I regret having given it to him, because he thought about putting a leather strap. So I was looking around for some extra leather straps. I found some and I put it on there. And as soon as I put the leather straps on this watch, I thought, oh shoot, I really do like this watch. But I had given it to him and we were just modifying it a little bit for his sake. And to this day, this is one of the watches that I do regret giving away, because it is a fantastic looking watch with a leather strap on it. It is outstanding with a leather strap. It really pulls out the fieldness, the field side of this watch. It's just an awesome looking watch. Two watches that just haven't set well with me. One, because I bought two of them and I need to get rid of one of them. And the other one, it was trying to be something that it wasn't. So let's talk about the Zelos Aurora. The Zelos Aurora Field Titanium. This is a watch that is supposed to be a field watch, but I'm not so sure that it's a field watch. It's more of a sport watch. And when you look at the design features and the design cues of this watch, it certainly has that field watch kind of case to it, but the dial doesn't speak anywhere near the field watch arena that I'm aware of, or that I think really speaks to the field watch design cues. So for me, the Aurora just doesn't fit that title of it being a field watch. It has more of a sporty watch look to it. And for sport watches, I think that's probably the one type of watch that I just don't have very many of, because either I go dive watch or I go field watch, and the sport watch is kind of that hybrid in between. And to me, that's where this watch landed. So it's ended up on my website being for sale. It's a limited edition. They're not making any more of these. They're all sold out. So yeah, this is going to be a higher price than the actual retail price, because there's just not many of them out there for sale. But take a look at it if you're interested in it. But I think this watch, if you're interested in a sport watch, it is unbelievable. It's outstanding as a sport watch. Titanium case, titanium bracelet, excellent lume, great movement. The design features inside the watch are awesome. And I purposely chose the blue version because I love the yellow second hand. I think it stands out really well. The legibility of this watch is incredible. All right, the Helm Miyako. This is just an attrition because I had two of them. When I was offered the opportunity to buy the Helm Miyako, I waited about a year to get in. It's just over a year before I could purchase this watch. And so I purchased two of them. I purchased the black version, or kind of the gray version, and the blue version. And I wore both of them for a little bit, and I checked them out. And when I did the review, I kind of liked the black version or the gray version more than I liked the blue version. But then when I finished the review and I was looking at them both, I was like, I want something with just a little bit more pizzazz to it, something with a little more of a difference to it. So I'm selling the gray one, keeping the blue one. I like the Miyako. I've been wearing it quite a bit, actually. I think it's a great dressy dive watch. It's ISO certified, has a great movement, great legibility, lume. Everything about this watch is awesome, except for the NATO strap. The NATO strap is incredibly difficult to manipulate, loosen up. I'm just not a fan of the NATO strap to begin with, so that's pretty apparent. So what I did was I put a leather strap on here, and I love the look of the leather strap. The black version or the gray version, slate gray, whatever you want to call it, the same thing. I had the leather strap on there, and I really like the look of the leather strap on that model as well. I'm selling with what it came with, which is the metal bracelet and also the NATO strap. So check it out on my website, realidealgear.com, if you're interested in the Helm Miyako. That one is pretty much close to what you're going to pay, including shipping. There's really no markup at all. It's just, if you want it, there you go. You can buy it and have it now. Just a reviewed only watch. Now, the Pagani PD1717, one of my favorite watches from AliExpress. I love this watch. Why I don't have it in my collection was because I opened my big mouth and said to my youngest son, would you like a watch? And how about this one? I think this is a really nice looking watch. I have no idea why I said this to him, because I really like this watch. But he looked at it as like, yeah, that's a cool looking watch. The PD1717 is a great sport watch. Yes, it's an Homage, but it's a great looking sport watch. And for under $100, I mean, actually it's for right around $60. It's one of the best values on AliExpress overall. You have a Seiko NH movement in there. You have great legibility. The design is great. 200 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, and a bracelet and clasp that's just functional. It works. There's nothing wrong with it. Great micro adjusts on there. So overall, do I regret that one? Yeah, I'm kind of looking back at a Pagani and saying, I think I need to get another Pagani. Not the 1717. I had some time with that one. I may be getting another one here soon. Last but not least, are the nurse watches. These are the watches that I had for that nurse episode very early on in the channel history, where I was showcasing some watches I thought medical EMT people might enjoy wearing that might help them with their job. I looked at a variety of different watches. All of the watches were very cheap, less than $100. I think they were all under $60 if I remember right. Some of them were full lume dials, some of them were not, quartz movements, just great looking watches overall. Most of those watches, actually all but one of them, I've given them away. My wife has given them away to students in her class. I've only kept one of them, and that was the MDC Infantry. One of my favorite field watches came out of that cluster. So highly recommend the MDC field watch from Amazon. The only place you can get that watch is on Amazon. And the rest of them, they're great looking watches. As a matter of fact, my wife kept one of the watches. It's just a simple black and white version. It's a really basic looking watch, and she loves it. And she wears it a lot. So that whole cluster of watches, I think there was probably 4 or 5 in there. They kind of all went out the door at the same time, with the exception of the MDC. Ah, the Casios. You love them. You have too many of them. What are you going to do with all of them? Well, for me, it's probably the same that most everybody out there has experienced. I'm going to give a few of them away, sell a few of them, and keep a bunch of them. So let's go through the list of watches that I no longer have in my Casio collection anymore, and see where they've ended up. So first up on the list are the watches that have what I call crammed displays. They've crammed in too much stuff on the display. Some of it's cutesy, some of it they're trying to be useful with it, but at the same time it's just too much stuff on a Casio display, too much stuff on the wrist. To start things off is the Casio Royale. I know I'm going to get some flack for this one. I know it's one of the great watches that's out there. But as far as the display goes, too much stuff on the display. You have a world map that tells you what time zone you're in. Why do I need to have that on the display 24 hours a day? You can't get rid of it. It does show you kind of where you're headed when you're adjusting the time zone. So I get that if you're traveling, you can see the progression of the time zones that you're moving through. But other than that, you don't need the world map. And then to have the second time zone on the same display in the upper left-hand corner, I just think it's unnecessary. This is something that you can click through on most other watches, most other Casio watches. You just use the mode button and go to a different mode, and you're there. And sometimes the different mode, when you're in a dual time mode or a world time mode, you get to see the home time mode at the bottom. So for me, there's just other ways to do this that don't clutter up the display as much. So for that reason, I got rid of this watch. Now, other watches that have that cluttered display also include the F200. The F200, great features. I love the features, the modes that are on this watch. But again, they have that little indicator pie piece up in the upper right-hand corner. Just not for me at all. Too much clutter. Could have used the space more effectively, more efficiently, like they did with the F201. The F201 resolves the F200 issues very, very nicely. Next up is the WS1600. The WS1600 doesn't have quite a cluttered display as the Royale. They both share the same case design, the same bracelet design, the same straps. So you can interchange those back and forth, including the crystals that go on both of those watches. So if you're going to mod these watches, what goes on the Royale goes on the WS1600, and then vice versa, the 1600 on the Royale. So great for modding. But when it comes down to usability, those preset timers and the way the timers work just isn't for me, and not for the regular guy. For referees, I could totally see how this works. And also that indicator bar at the top, again, inefficient use of space. Next up is the WV200A. This is a wave scepter watch that has that radio control connection to the atomic timekeeping mode. And for those of you in countries or locations where you can utilize this feature, it's a great feature. I had this watch designated as one of my camping watches. I just strapped it to my backpack so it was always there. A 10-year battery, 200 meters of water resistance. This is a great outdoor hiking, camping watch. The issue is there's just too many things going on the display. Again, they've crammed too much stuff onto the display. Too many different levels, and with each level they have a separation that takes up space between those different levels or different sections on the watch. And so overall, there's just a massive inefficiency of space that's being used on the display. For that reason, I'm not a fan of this watch. Gave it away to my cousin's family. I hope they're enjoying it right now. I think it's a good watch for the features. The features are outstanding, just not for me legibly. The AQS810W. This is an anti-digi watch that I really liked from the distance until I got the watch in hand and I saw how small the display was. I mean, the display is way too small. If you have reading glasses and legibility is a high concern for you, don't recommend you this watch, but if it doesn't matter to you, this is a great watch. The analog piece, I love the analog display when it comes down to reading time. I think I can read that a little bit faster than I can a digital display. So the AQS810 is just not a watch that I was a big fan of, particularly the display. So for that reason, this watch is also out of my collection. There was a release last year in 2023, the MWD 110, and it was a huge hit when it came out. Everybody was talking about it. It hit the YouTube channels like crazy. I got one, looked at it, and thought to myself, this is a poor attempt at trying to replicate the square and trying to get lightning to strike twice. So for me, I just did not like the looks of the watch. I thought it was too close to the square, and at the same time, it just didn't have the same appeal. The metal look to it with the resin case was not my style, and just so much about this watch that was just not for me. The design feature actually was probably the biggest thing that turned me off to this watch, and for that reason, it left my collection in a hurry. Next up is the MRW 200. I called it the Magpie. Fantastic analog watch. Super simple, friction-based bezel that goes bi-directional, either direction. Great looking watch. I love the black and white version. I had a neon green and black version, which I tried to oil fill and it was not successful, and I just got distracted with other projects, and so I never went back to it. But this watch is actually, I think, a very good analog watch. And for something under $30, you can't go wrong with this watch. It has great water resistance rating. It has a great legibility, very easy to use. One of those kind of just simple analog dial watches with a quartz movement that just grab and go. So if you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend it. For me, why did I get rid of it? There was just too many Casios. And frankly, I had a bunch of divers, and it was like a Casio that's kind of a dive watch. I just can't hang on to this one, so that one also left the collection as well. The F108. Now, this to me is the answer to the venerable F91. I can't stand the F91. I'm not going to talk anymore about it because I go off on rants on all the videos where I talk about it. So the F108 to me is the answer for it. It's the antidote. Much better display, much better light. All around, just a better watch, I think, for the money. Why did it leave my collection? I just don't have the space for it. It was a matter of attrition based upon volume. I just had too many Casio watches. I think it's a great watch, a great value for what it is. And it also kind of has a little bit of a G-Shock look to it, if you ask me. So design-wise, function-wise, very basic, but very functional and very much worth the money. Last but not least, the Casio calculator watch, the CA506. The 506 is a watch that is the metal version, basically, of the Back to the Future watch, the CA53. And the CA53 is actually the updated version of the original Back to the Future watch in Back to the Future 1, which was the CA50. So go all the way back to the CA506, and it just doesn't quite fit. When it comes to the design, when it comes to the metal links on the bracelet, it just doesn't quite fit the whole Casio calculator aura that I was looking for. I'd much rather have that particular model in the black resin version, which is why I kept the CA53. So for me, the 506 just doesn't fit. The links are also kind of large, so the articulation of the links around your wrist, it's just a little bit wider of a radius than I like. I'd like to have it be a little bit closer together, kind of like the DBC 611. The links on there are smaller, and so they just have a little bit more refined articulation around the wrist. So anyway, the CA506, not in my collection, not my preference. Sent it back to Amazon, actually. It was just, I'm not interested in this watch. I don't want to try selling it either. I'm just going to send it back. So there's the list of watches that did not stay in my collection. Check out my website, realidealgear.com, to see if those watches made it onto that website for sale. Sometimes I give them away so they don't even make it to the website. But I do have limited edition watches that have been sold there, so check that out as well. An update for the channel is I'll be doing more gear reviews in the future. I will still be doing the watch reviews. I love doing watch reviews, but I'll be doing more gear reviews like knives, watches, flashlights, everyday carry type stuff, hiking, hunting, camping, all that stuff. You're going to see more of that get into the mix of videos that are out there. So if you have any ideas, put those in the comments down below. It'll give me the impetus to go out and either take the stuff I have and do a video on it, or maybe I pick something up to help out viewers like you as far as understanding how these things work, different applications, things like that. So thank you to everybody who's been watching the channel and supporting the channel over the past year. Spread the word, share it. It's always good. It is something that I just enjoy doing. I'll probably do this no matter how many comments, likes, subscriptions that I get. It's just one of those things I love doing. So thank you very much. My name's Tim. This has been another Real Ideal Gear Review. We'll catch you guys next time. Why do I have to burp all the time? Next up. ending. Here's the ending of it.